Jungkook's voice suddenly broke in the middle of a high note. Jimin ran to hug him on stage, whispering, "I'm here." The whole arena cried together. A shattered high note, a silent fear, and a hug that stopped time. An arena witnesses vulnerability that turns into unforgettable unity. The note was supposed to soar. Instead, it shattered. The sound tore midair like glass under pressure, a jagged crack that sliced through the music and left a vacuum where perfection had lived seconds before. 70,000 light sticks froze in the dark, their synchronized ocean faltering into scattered flickers. On stage, Jungkook stood motionless, the echo of his failed high note ringing louder in his skull than the arena's stunned silence. His throat burned, not from strain, he knew strain. This was something colder, deeper, a betrayal. For a heartbeat, the world forgot how to breathe. Then footsteps. Soft, urgent, familiar. Before the backup track could fill the void, before the crowd could decide whether to scream or pretend nothing had happened, Jimin crossed the stage in 3 swift strides and wrapped his arms around him. The embrace wasn't choreographed. It wasn't part of the show. It was human, messy, instinctive, real. "I'm here," Jimin whispered, his voice barely audible over the lingering reverb. The microphones caught it anyway. A ripple moved through the arena, not sound, not yet, but feeling. The kind that begins in the chest and spreads outward, dissolving the invisible wall between performer and audience. Jungkook's fingers trembled against the fabric of Jimin's jacket. He had spent years building an armor of discipline, perfect breath control, relentless rehearsals, the quiet ritual of humming scales into a cup of warm honey water before every show. His fear had always been simple and unspoken. What if one day the voice that defined him simply stopped obeying? Tonight, the fear had found him under 1,000 spotlights. He pulled back slightly, forcing a smile that felt like it belonged to someone else. The crowd saw the smile. Jimin saw the truth behind it, the flicker of panic, the shame tightening his jaw, the old memory resurfacing, the teenage Jungkook who once hid in a practice room after a cracked note, convinced he had disappointed everyone who believed in him. The band hesitated, waiting for a signal. Jimin squeezed his shoulder. "We sing together," he murmured, not into the mic this time, but into the fragile space between them. Together. The word anchored him. Jungkook inhaled. The air smelled of stage smoke, warm electronics, and the faint citrus of Jimin's cologne, a scent that had followed countless rehearsals, late-night recordings, and silent car rides when exhaustion made conversation impossible. Grounding, familiar, safe. The next line began, softer than planned, not the explosive power the arrangement demanded, but something rawer. His voice wavered at the edges, like a candle flame in wind. Jimin's harmony slipped beneath it, steady and warm, not overpowering but carrying, like hands cupped around that fragile flame. The audience understood. A single sob echoed from somewhere in the lower tiers, then another. Soon the arena was filled with the sound of people crying openly, unashamed, their tears catching the light like scattered stars. They weren't mourning a mistake. They were witnessing a truth rarely allowed on stages built for perfection. Even the strongest voices can fracture, and even idols need someone to hold them steady. Jungkook felt the shift. The fear didn't vanish, it loosened. He sang the next note with closed eyes, not chasing perfection, not proving anything, but offering what remained of his voice in that moment. It was enough, more than enough. The melody changed shape around his vulnerability, and the band followed, improvising with the kind of trust forged only through years of shared failures and triumphs. Between lines, Jimin stayed close, their shoulders brushing, not a spectacle, a promise. Memories flickered through Jungkook's mind in fragmented flashes. A rainy night when he almost quit training, convinced he wasn't good enough. The first time he heard the roar of a crowd chanting his name and felt equal parts awe and terror. The countless mornings he woke before dawn, repeating the same vocal runs until his throat ached, chasing a standard no one had asked him to meet but himself. Perfection had always been his shield. Tonight it cracked, and nothing collapsed. The final chorus arrived, not as a thunderous climax, but as a collective exhale. The crowd sang the high note he could not, their voices rising in a trembling, unified choir. Jungkook lowered his microphone, stunned, as 70,000 strangers carried the melody he had feared losing. He wasn't alone. Tears blurred the stage lights into halos. He laughed softly through them, a sound the microphones barely caught, but the front rows felt like a pulse. Jimin nudged him with a grin that said, "See, still here." When the song ended, silence fell again, but this time it was reverent, full, alive. Jungkook stepped forward. His voice, when he spoke, was husky but steady. "I thought, if I ever broke on stage, it would mean I failed you." A chorus of "no" thundered back, immediate and fierce. He swallowed, emotion tightening his throat more than any high note ever had. "Thank you for singing with me." The arena answered with a roar that felt less like applause and more like an embrace. Jimin slipped his hand into Jungkook for a brief squeeze before letting go, a small gesture hidden in plain sight. The lights shifted, the next track cued, the machinery of the concert ready to resume its flawless rhythm. But something had changed. The stage no longer felt like a pedestal, it felt like shared ground. And as Jungkook lifted the microphone again, not to prove his strength, but to share his humanity, he realized that the voice he feared losing had never truly belonged to him alone. It lived in every person who sang back, every hand that reached out through the dark, every quiet whisper of "I'm here" that turned fear into courage. The music resumed, not perfect, but real, and in that imperfection, the entire arena found a harmony far more powerful than any flawless high note. The dressing room door slammed so hard the walls seemed to flinch. Jungkook stood in the center of the room, still in his stage outfit, sweat cooling against his skin like a second, uncomfortable truth. The muffled roar of the crowd beyond the concrete corridors continued, chants, sobs, a tidal wave of emotion that refused to settle even after the lights dimmed. "I said I'm fine," he snapped, though no one had accused him of anything yet. Across from him, Jimin * crossed his arms, jaw tight. "You call that fine? Your hands were shaking so hard you almost dropped the mic." "I didn't drop it. You almost did." The air between them crackled, not with anger alone, but with fear neither of them wanted to name. A stylist hovered near the doorway, clutching a towel like a shield. The manager whispered urgently into his phone in the hall. Somewhere down the corridor, a crew member argued with security about letting medical staff through. The machine of the tour had shifted into crisis mode, gears grinding in anxious rhythm. Jungkook ran a hand through his damp hair. "It was one note." "It was not one note," Jimin shot back. "It was you freezing in front of 70,000 people like you were about to disappear." The words landed harder than intended. Jungkook's eyes flashed. "You think I don't know that?" Silence slammed down between them. Jimin's anger faltered, revealing the fear underneath. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Talk to me. You've been pushing your range higher every night, skipping vocal rest, pretending you're invincible. Why?" Jungkook laughed, sharp and humorless, "Because that's what everyone expects." "Everyone?" Jimin's gaze hardened. "Or you?" The question cut too close. Jungkook turned away, staring at his reflection in the mirror. The stage makeup had begun to smudge, eyeliner blurred by sweat and tears he hadn't realized he'd shed. For a moment, he didn't see the global star. He saw the kid who once practiced until his throat bled because he thought love was conditional on perfection. "I can't be the one who breaks," he murmured. Behind him, Jimin's expression softened, but his voice remained steady. "You already did, and the world didn't end." Before Jungkook could respond, the door burst open again. RM** stepped in, breathless, eyes scanning the room. "The internet's exploding," he said without preamble. "Half the clips are people crying, the other half," he hesitated. "The other half what?" Jungkook demanded. RM exhaled slowly, speculating, vocal damage, burnout, conspiracy theories about lip-syncing. You know how fast narratives form. Jungkook's stomach dropped. The arena's love had felt infinite. The world outside already felt colder. A phone buzzed. Another. Notifications stacked like falling dominoes. Jimin grabbed one of the devices, scrolling. His face tightened. They're analyzing the waveform of your voice, slowing the clip down, saying the crack proves you've been overworked. Have I? Jungkook asked quietly. No one answered. The question lingered like smoke. A knock sounded, firm, official. The tour doctor entered, followed by a vocal coach flown in from another city after the sound check concerns Jungkook had dismissed that morning. You need an exam, the doctor said gently. I have another show tomorrow, Jungkook replied. And you have one voice, the coach countered, which you almost lost tonight. The room grew smaller. Jimin stepped between them and Jungkook. He'll do the exam. Jungkook bristled. Don't decide for me. I'm not deciding, Jimin said, voice trembling with restrained emotion. I'm refusing to watch you destroy yourself. Their eyes locked, years of friendship, rivalry, unspoken promises colliding in a single charged silence. You think I'm doing this on purpose, Jungkook whispered. I think you're scared, Jimin replied, and instead of admitting it, you're trying to outrun it. The words hit like a physical blow. For a moment, Jungkook looked like he might argue again, then his shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him. What if they're right, he said. What if tonight was the beginning of the end? Jimin's expression broke. He closed the distance and gripped Jungkook's shoulders. Then we face it, together, not alone on a stage pretending you're unbreakable. The vulnerability in his voice silenced the room. RM looked away, giving them space. The doctor pretended to check his bag. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to soften. Jungkook swallowed hard. When my voice cracked, I thought everyone would see I'm replaceable. Jimin's grip tightened. No one is you, not your voice, not your heart, not the way you look at the crowd like you're trying to memorize every face. A tear slipped down Jungkook's cheek before he could stop it. He laughed weakly. You always notice the weirdest things. I notice you, Jimin said simply. The confession hung in the air, heavy, intimate, dangerously honest. Before the moment could settle, another voice echoed from the hallway, raised, urgent, unfamiliar. A journalist had slipped past security, shouting questions about the breakdown, about industry pressure, about whether tonight's incident proved the darker rumors surrounding the tour. Security scrambled, the manager swore, camera shutters clicked like distant gunfire. Jungkook's head snapped toward the door. They're already here. RM's jaw clenched. This will be everywhere by morning. The fragile sanctuary of the dressing room shattered. Jimin stepped closer to Jungkook again, their shoulders touching, a silent barrier against the noise outside. Let them talk, he said. They don't get to define this moment, we do. Jungkook closed his eyes, breathing in slowly, grounding himself in the warmth beside him. The chaos beyond the walls, speculation, headlines, endless analysis, felt inevitable. But so did the memory of 70,000 voices carrying him when he faltered. He opened his eyes, steadier now. Then we define it, he said. The doctor cleared his throat gently. First, we protect the voice that made them sing. Jungkook nodded. As he followed the doctor toward the exam room, he glanced back. Jimin stood in the doorway, watching him with a mixture of worry and fierce loyalty that felt stronger than any spotlight. Outside, the arena lights dimmed one by one, but the echoes of the crowd's song lingered, proof that even a broken note could unite thousands, and that sometimes the most controversial, terrifying moment becomes the one that reveals who will stay when the music stops. The exam room smelled like antiseptic and fear. Jungkook sat on the narrow leather chair, elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles blanched. The bright overhead light hummed, exposing every flaw, sweat-damp hair, smudged eyeliner, the faint tremor in his jaw he could no longer hide. Across from him, the vocal coach adjusted a small laryngoscope camera with clinical precision. The monitor beside it glowed an unforgiving blue. Open, the doctor said gently. Jungkook obeyed. The camera slid into place. A grainy image bloomed on the screen, pink tissue, delicate folds, the machinery of a voice that had carried dreams across continents. The room fell silent except for the soft whir of the equipment. Behind him, Jimin * hovered near the wall, arms folded tight, as if holding himself together by force. RM stood beside him, expression unreadable, phone silenced in his palm but vibrating relentlessly with incoming updates. The doctor leaned closer to the screen. A pause. Too long. Jungkook's pulse roared in his ears. Just say it. The doctor exhaled. You have inflammation, significant, there's microswelling along the folds. The words dropped like stones into still water. Damage, RM asked quietly. Not permanent, the vocal coach replied, choosing each word with surgical care. But if he continues at this intensity without rest, it could become permanent. Jimin's breath hitched. How long? At least 2 weeks of strict vocal rest, the doctor said. No singing, minimal speaking. The room exploded. That's impossible, Jungkook said immediately. We have 3 cities left, sold-out arenas, fans who would rather have you alive and whole than watch you destroy yourself. Jimin cut in, voice shaking with anger. You don't know that, Jungkook snapped. They waited years for this tour. And you think they came to watch you collapse, Jimin fired back, because that's where this is going. The doctor raised a hand, but the dam had broken. Jungkook stood, chair scraping violently against the floor. You think I don't feel it? Every expectation, every headline calling me the golden voice. If I stop now, they'll say I couldn't handle it, that I cracked under pressure. RM's voice was low but firm. You did crack, and they sang you through it. The truth landed like a slap. Jungkook's chest rose and fell rapidly. You don't understand. Jimin stepped forward, eyes blazing. Then make me understand, because from where I'm standing, you're choosing pride over survival. Silence detonated in the room. Jungkook's voice dropped to a whisper. If my voice isn't reliable, who am I on that stage? The question wasn't rhetorical. It was raw, stripped of ego, trembling with a fear he had buried for years. Jimin's expression faltered. For a moment, anger gave way to something deeper, grief, maybe, or the ache of watching someone you love measure their worth in decibels. You're the one who stayed up all night teaching me harmonies when I couldn't hit them, Jimin said softly. You're the one who memorizes fan chants in languages you don't speak. You're the one who runs back on stage if someone drops a light stick because you can't stand the idea of them leaving empty-handed. Jungkook looked away, throat tight. You're not your high notes, Jimin continued. You're everything between them. The confession hung in the air, dangerously intimate. A sudden knock shattered the moment. The manager burst in, pale. We have a situation. RM straightened. What now? There's leaked audio, the manager said. From soundcheck, you telling the crew you felt something tear in your throat this morning. Jungkook's blood ran cold. That was private. Not anymore, the manager replied. It's trending worldwide. Hashtags about exploitation. Some are accusing the company of forcing you to perform injured. Jimin's head snapped toward Jungkook. You felt something tear and you didn't tell anyone. It wasn't a tear, Jungkook insisted. It was a sensation, it passed. You don't get to decide what's serious when it's your body on the line. Jimin's voice cracked, equal parts fury and fear. RM rubbed his temples. The narrative is spiraling. If we cancel, they'll say it confirms the damage. If we continue, they'll accuse us of negligence. The weight of thousands of eyes, millions online, pressed in from all sides. Jungkook laughed bitterly. So no matter what I do, I'm a headline. Jimin stepped closer, his voice low and urgent. Then stop performing for headlines, choose yourself. The words struck deeper than any accusation. Jungkook stared at the floor, memories flooding back in fractured flashes. a younger version of himself bowing repeatedly after a minor mistake. The first time he read a comment calling him replaceable, the quiet terror that love could vanish if perfection faltered. "I don't know how to choose myself," he admitted. The room went still. Jimin's eyes softened. The fight draining out of him. Then let someone choose you for once. He reached out, fingers brushing Jungkook's wrist, hesitant, almost afraid the contact might be rejected. Jungkook didn't pull away. RM cleared his throat, voice steady despite the tension. "We need a statement within the hour." Jungkook looked up. "Say I'm resting." The manager blinked. "Are you sure?" The decision hung in the air, heavy with consequence. Jungkook inhaled slowly. "Tell them the truth. My voice needs time, and I'm finally listening." Jimin's grip tightened, relief flashing across his face, so quickly it almost hurt to see. But before anyone could speak, a commotion erupted in the hallway, raised voices, the sharp click of cameras, a reporter shouting, "Is it true the group is breaking up after tonight?" The words sliced through the fragile calm like a blade. RM's eyes darkened. "They're escalating." Jungkook closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the impact. The arena's love, the internet's fury, the industry's pressure, all colliding into a storm he could no longer outrun. When he opened them again, there was fear there, but also something new, resolve, fragile but real. "We're not breaking," he said quietly. "We are pausing. There's a difference." Outside, the chants of fans who refused to leave the arena echoed through the concrete corridors, soft at first, then swelling, a living heartbeat that refused to let the night end in silence. Jimin squeezed his hand once, fiercely. And for the first time since the note shattered, Jungkook allowed himself to believe that stopping might not be the end of his voice, but the beginning of learning how to keep it. The hallway lights flickered, as if the building itself was struggling to contain the chaos. Security radios crackled, camera shutters fired in relentless bursts. The chant outside the arena, once a soft wave of comfort, had morphed into something louder, more urgent, thousands of voices calling names, demanding answers, refusing to leave. Jungkook stood just beyond the dressing room threshold, frozen between retreat and confrontation. The air smelled of sweat, hot cables, and the metallic tang of panic. "Don't go out there," the manager warned, gripping his arm. "They're not asking questions, they're hunting a story." "I am the story," Jungkook replied hoarsely. Beside him, Jimin *** tightened his jaw. "Then let me stand next to you when they try to tear it apart." From down the corridor, a reporter's voice cut through the noise. "Is it true the injury was hidden to protect ticket sales? Did management force him to perform?" Another shouted, "Are tensions inside the group the real reason for the cancellation rumors?" RM exhaled slowly, stepping forward with the calm of someone used to walking into storms. "If we don't control the narrative, it will control us." Jungkook's pulse hammered. He could still feel the phantom crack of the broken note reverberating in his chest, like a fault line waiting to split further. The doctor's words echoed, "Permanent damage." "Permanent." He swallowed. "5 minutes," he said. "We give them 5 minutes, then I rest." The manager hesitated. This could go very wrong. Jimin's voice was steady, almost defiant. "It already has. Now we make it honest." They stepped into the corridor. The explosion of light was immediate, white flashes detonating in their faces, questions hurled like stones. "Jungkook, did you ignore medical advice? Is the group overworked? Are you being silenced?" Security tried to push the press back, but the questions kept coming, overlapping, sharpening. Jungkook raised a hand. The movement was small, but it rippled through the chaos. The shouting dimmed, not out of respect, but anticipation. His voice, when he spoke, was rough, stripped of performance polish. "I'm not being silenced." A murmur spread through the crowd of reporters. "I sang tonight because I believed I could," he continued. "I stopped because my voice told me the truth." A reporter leaned forward, and the truth is you're injured. Jungkook hesitated. The word felt heavy, final. My voice is inflamed, he said carefully, and I'm going to rest it, not because I was forced to perform, not because anyone hid anything, because I finally listened to my body. Another voice cut in sharply, so the company didn't pressure you. Jimin stepped forward before Jungkook could answer. No one pressures him more than he pressures himself. The admission hung in the air, raw, controversial, dangerously honest. Cameras zoomed in. Are you saying the industry culture is to blame? A journalist pressed. RM's expression hardened. We are saying artists are human, and humans have limits that shouldn't be controversial. The questions grew sharper. Fans spent thousands to be here. What do you say to them? Jungkook's chest tightened. He pictured the ocean of light sticks, the voices that had carried his broken note, the tears reflecting stage lights like constellations. I say thank you, he replied, voice trembling, and I'm sorry perfection is the only version of me you were promised. Tonight you got the real one. The corridor fell into a stunned hush. From somewhere beyond the barricades, a fan's voice broke through, loud and shaking. We don't want perfect, we want you alive. The words detonated like a shockwave. More voices followed. Rest. We'll wait. Take care of yourself. The chant shifted, rising in a unified roar that drowned out the press, the speculation, the hunger for scandal. Jungkook's vision blurred. He hadn't realized he was crying until Jimin's hand tightened around his sleeve. See, Jimin whispered, too low for the microphones. They chose you. But the storm wasn't finished. A senior executive pushed through the crowd, face pale with controlled fury. This impromptu statement was not approved. RM's eyes flashed, neither was his voice breaking. The executive's gaze snapped to Jungkook. Do you understand the financial implications of halting the tour, the contractual penalties? Stop, Jimin said, voice sharp enough to cut glass. The executive blinked, stunned. You're talking about penalties, Jimin continued, stepping closer, every word trembling with contained rage. He's talking about whether he can sing for the rest of his life. The corridor held its breath. Jungkook stared at Jimin, stunned by the ferocity in his defense. A part of him, the part still shaped by years of obedience and fear, wanted to apologize, to promise he'd push through, to make the problem disappear. Instead, he heard his own voice say, the tour pauses. The executive's face tightened. You don't have the authority. I do, RM said quietly. We do. The declaration landed with seismic force. For a moment, it seemed the entire industry hierarchy, contracts, expectations, silent rules, had been challenged in a single breath. The executive looked from one face to another and realized the decision had already been made. He stepped back. The reporters erupted again, but the questions had changed. Is this a new precedent for artist health? Will other performers follow? Is this the beginning of a shift in industry power? Jungkook barely heard them. The roar of the fans outside had swelled into a living tide, chanting not for a performance, but for rest, for healing, for the fragile human behind the voice they loved. His knees felt weak. Jimin noticed immediately, slipping an arm around his back, steadying him without spectacle. You're done, he murmured. No more heroics tonight. Jungkook managed a faint, exhausted smile. You always ruin my dramatic exits. Someone has to keep you alive long enough to make them. They turned back toward the dressing room, leaving the storm of cameras and questions behind. The corridor felt quieter now, not silent, but less suffocating, as if the building itself had exhaled. Inside the room, the doctor waited, relief evident in his posture. You made the right decision. Jungkook sank into the chair, the adrenaline draining from his limbs. It doesn't feel brave. It rarely does, RM replied, leaning against the wall. It feels terrifying, That's how you know it matters. Jimin handed Jungkook a glass of warm water. Their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away immediately. For the first time that night, the silence between them wasn't heavy. It was fragile, healing. Outside, the chants continued, not fading, but softening into something steadier, like a heartbeat promising tomorrow. Jungkook closed his eyes, letting the sound anchor him. He had feared that one broken note would end everything. Instead, it had shattered something else, the illusion that he had to stand alone on the stage, unbreakable, untouchable, silent about his own limits. And in the echo of that fracture, he heard something stronger than applause, thousands of voices willing to wait for him to heal. And one voice beside him that had never left, even when the music stopped. The hotel suite was too quiet for a night that had nearly torn the world apart. Jungkook sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his thighs, staring at the muted television. Every news channel displayed the same looping footage, the broken high note, the sudden embrace, the corridor confrontation, the executive's stunned retreat. Headlines crawled across the bottom of the screen in relentless red banners. Global superstar, HALTS tour mid-concert. Industry, power struggle, EIUPTS live. Fans defend artist in unprecedented show of solidarity. He grabbed the remote and turned it off. Silence rushed in, thick and unfamiliar. A soft knock came at the door. He knew who it was before opening it. Jimin stood there in a plain hoodie, hair still damp from a rushed shower, eyes shadowed with exhaustion and something heavier, unspoken worry that had not left him since the stage. "You should be sleeping," Jungkook rasped, voice barely above a whisper. Jimin stepped inside without waiting for permission. "You should be too. Instead, you're watching the world dissect your vocal cords on cable news." "They're not wrong," Jungkook muttered. Jimin shut the door harder than necessary. "Stop saying that." The tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. "I felt it, Jimin," Jungkook shot back, his voice gaining force despite the strain. "Something gave. What if next time it doesn't come back? What if tonight was the beginning of the end and everyone's just too kind to admit it?" Jimin's jaw clenched. "Kind? You think 70,000 people sobbing your name is pity?" "I think it's the last time they'll hear me the same way," Jungkook said. The words hung between them, raw and poisonous. Jimin stared at him, disbelief melting into anger. "You're unbelievable." "Because I'm scared. Because you'd rather rewrite reality than accept that people love you beyond your voice." The shout echoed off the suite walls. For a moment, neither of them moved. Outside, the city hummed, distant traffic, neon lights buzzing, a world continuing as if nothing had shifted. Inside, the air felt charged enough to spark. Jungkook stood abruptly, packing. "You don't understand what it's like to be praised for one thing your entire life, to know that if that one thing fails, then you're still you," Jimin cut in. Jungkook stopped. "That's easy for you to say." The regret was immediate, visible. Jimin recoiled as if struck. "Easy." His laugh was hollow. "Do you know what it's like to stand next to you every night and wonder if my voice will blend or disappear, to be called the support as if that's a lesser role, to smile through it because I love you too much to let jealousy exist?" The confession detonated. Jungkook's eyes widened. "You were jealous." "I was human," Jimin snapped. "And then tonight, when your voice broke, my first thought was finally, it was please let him be okay. That's what love does, it kills the competition." The room fell silent, the word love echoing louder than any shout. Jungkook's throat tightened. "You never said." "Because it wasn't about me," Jimin said, voice shaking. "It was about you surviving the expectations that were slowly suffocating you." The truth landed with crushing clarity. Jungkook sank onto the bed, the fight draining from his body. "I thought if I stopped being perfect, I'd lose everything." Jimin's anger softened into something more fragile. He sat beside him, leaving inches of space that felt heavier than distance. You almost lost yourself trying not to. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the city's glow bleeding through the curtains, painting the room in restless gold. Jungkook spoke first, barely audible. When the fans sang the note, I couldn't hear myself anymore, and I panicked, not because I was replaced, because it sounded beautiful. Jimin turned to him, confusion flickering. Beautiful. It wasn't perfect, Jungkook said. It was thousands of imperfect voices, cracking and straining and missing pitch, and it was more powerful than anything I've ever sung alone. His eyes glistened. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or obsolete. Jimin's expression broke into something like awe. You felt both, that's the point. A phone buzzed on the nightstand, shattering the fragile calm. Notifications flooded the screen, statements from other artists, messages of support, debates igniting across every platform. Jimin picked it up, scrolling, his brows furrowed. There's a rumor trending that you were forced to continue rehearsals despite doctor warnings weeks ago. Jungkook frowned. That's not true. Jimin hesitated. Is it? The pause was answer enough. Jungkook looked away. They suggested rest. I said I could handle it. Jimin's voice rose again, incredulous. So you lied by omission. I made a choice. You made a gamble with your future. The argument surged back to life, hotter, more dangerous. A sudden pounding on the door interrupted them, not polite, urgent. Jimin opened it to reveal RM, breathless, phone in hand. RM asterisk looked between them, instantly reading the charged atmosphere. We have another problem, he said. Jungkook's stomach dropped. What now? RM swallowed. A leaked internal memo. It outlines contingency plans for replacing main vocal lines if your condition worsens. The words hit like a physical blow. Replacing, Jungkook repeated, the syllables hollow. Jimin's face drained of color. They planned this. It's standard risk management, RM said carefully, but the public doesn't see it that way. They see proof you're expendable. The room spun. Jungkook let out a broken laugh. So my worst fear is trending. Jimin stepped closer, fury blazing anew. You are not expendable. Apparently, there's a memo that says otherwise. Paper doesn't define your worth, Jimin's voice cracked. People do, we do. The raw conviction in his tone cut through the fog of doubt. RM watched them quietly before speaking. We can address the memo, deny it, contextualize it, but the real question is, what do you believe about yourself when the noise stops? The question lingered, heavy and unavoidable. Jungkook looked at his hands, calloused from years of rehearsals, trembling despite the stillness. He thought of the arena's voices, the embrace on stage, the confession in this room, the memo reducing him to a contingency line. Fear clawed at him, but beneath it, something steadier stirred. I believe, he said slowly, that I don't want to spend my life proving I'm irreplaceable. I want to live in a way that makes replacement irrelevant. Jimin's eyes filled, relief and pride warring with lingering fear. That's the first honest thing you've said all night. Jungkook huffed a weak laugh. High bar. RM's shoulders relaxed slightly. Then we start there, rest, recovery, and a future that doesn't demand you break to be believed. Outside, sirens wailed faintly, city lights flickering like distant applause. Inside, the storm had not fully passed, rumors still raged, headlines still burned, and the memo's shadow lingered. But for the first time since the note shattered, Jungkook did not feel like he was standing alone at the edge of silence. He felt the weight of fear, yes, but also the steady presence of two voices beside him, one fierce enough to fight the world, the other calm enough to guide him through it. And somewhere beneath the noise, his own voice remained, not perfect, not invincible, but still undeniably his. Dawn broke without permission. A thin blade of grey light cut through the hotel curtains, exposing a room that looked like it had survived a storm, discarded jackets, half-drunk glasses of water, phones drained of battery after a night of relentless alerts. The world outside had not waited for them to rest. It had accelerated. Jungkook hadn't slept. He sat on the floor with his back against the bed, knees drawn up, scrolling through messages he knew he shouldn't read. Fans begging him to recover. Critics accusing him of staging vulnerability for sympathy. Industry insiders debating his market stability as if he were a volatile stock rather than a human being. One comment froze him. If he can't sing, what is he? The words echoed his own private terror so precisely it felt like theft. The door creaked open. Jimin * stepped in, barefoot, holding 2 cups of steaming tea. He stopped when he saw Jungkook on the floor. "You didn't sleep," Jimin said quietly. Jungkook locked his phone and set it face down. "I tried." Jimin handed him the tea, honey and ginger, doctor's orders. Their fingers brushed. The contact lingered a fraction too long, charged with everything they hadn't resolved. Jimin sat beside him, back against the bed. For a while neither spoke. The city hummed awake, distant horns, elevators groaning. The low thrum of a world indifferent to personal crises. Finally, Jungkook whispered, "They're asking who I am without my voice." Jimin didn't ask who they were, he knew. "Who do you think you are?" Jungkook stared into the steam rising from his cup. "I don't know anymore." The honesty hurt to hear. Before Jimin could respond, a sharp knock rattled the door. Not urgent like the night before, authoritative. RM entered without waiting. RM * looked composed, but the dark circles under his eyes betrayed a night spent negotiating storms. "We need to talk," he said. Jimin tensed. "Mori leaks." "Worse," RM replied. "A major sponsor is threatening to withdraw unless we issue a statement confirming the tour will resume within a week." Jungkook's grip tightened around the teacup. "A week." "Their argument is financial stability," RM said. "They're framing your rest as a temporary setback that must be quickly corrected." Jimin's voice turned sharp. "He's not a malfunctioning machine that needs a quick fix." RM nodded. "I know, but they're leveraging contracts." Jungkook let out a hollow laugh. "So it comes down to money." "It always does," RM said quietly. Silence pressed in, suffocating. Jungkook stood, packing again, energy coiling beneath his skin. "If we don't comply, they'll pull funding," RM replied, "which could jeopardize future projects, staff salaries, entire teams who rely on this tour." The weight of unseen lives settled on Jungkook's shoulders. Dancers, technicians, drivers, families tied to the machinery of his voice. "So if I rest, people suffer," he murmured. Jimin stood abruptly. "No, if the system demands you break to sustain it, the system is broken." RM looked at him, weary but resolute. "Revolution sounds noble until you see the collateral." The tension ignited again, hotter than before. Jungkook's voice rose despite the strain. "Stop talking about me like I'm an economic model. I'm right here." Both men fell silent. His chest heaved. "I know people depend on this. I know contracts exist. But I also know what it felt like last night when my voice stopped obeying me. It felt like my body was begging me to listen for the first time." Jimin's eyes softened. "Then listen." RM rubbed his temples. "If we cancel indefinitely, the fallout will be massive. Lawsuits, blacklisting, quiet punishments that follow you for years." Jungkook laughed bitterly. "So my choices are destroy my voice now or my career later." The room had no answer. A phone buzzed again. Jimin glanced at it and froze. "You need to see this." He turned the screen. A video was trending, grainy backstage footage from years ago. A teenage Jungkook, voice cracking during rehearsal, bowing repeatedly while staff ignored him, someone off camera saying, "We can't afford weakness." Jungkook's face drained of color. Where did they get that? RM's expression darkened. Someone is digging deep. They're building a narrative, lifelong pressure, systemic neglect. It's becoming bigger than last night. Jimin's voice trembled with rage. They're turning his trauma into content. The video kept playing, young Jungkook wiping tears, forcing another attempt, voice raw. Adult Jungkook turned away, unable to watch. The memory hit like a physical blow, the shame, the determination, the quiet vow to never be weak again. I thought I buried that, he whispered. Jimin stepped in front of him, blocking the screen. You survived it, that's different. RM's phone rang. He answered, listening in silence, his face tightening with each passing second. When he hung up, the room felt colder. The executive board wants a private meeting, he said. They're considering bringing in a temporary main vocalist for the remaining dates. The words landed like an explosion. Jimin's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper, over my dead body. It's a contingency, RM said carefully. It's betrayal, Jimin shot back. Jungkook stood very still. A replacement, he repeated. The word no longer sounded hypothetical, it sounded imminent. A strange calm settled over him, the kind that arrives when fear crosses a threshold and becomes something else. If they bring someone in, he said slowly, the fans will know why. RM nodded, yes. And the narrative becomes that I was too weak to continue. Jimin grabbed his arm, or that you were strong enough to stop. Jungkook looked at him, eyes glassy. Strength doesn't trend, failure does. Jimin's grip tightened. Then let it trend, let them argue, let them rage, but don't you dare destroy yourself to make them comfortable. The conviction in his voice shook the room. RM watched them both, something like admiration flickering through his exhaustion. Whatever we decide, he said, we decide together, not in a boardroom, not in a headline. Jungkook closed his eyes. The arena's voices echoed in his memory, the memo, the sponsor, the teenage boy in the video, the man he had become. When he opened them, they were wet, but steady. No replacement, he said. Jimin exhaled sharply, relief colliding with lingering fury. RM studied him. You understand the consequences. I understand the cost of ignoring myself, Jungkook replied. I've paid it my whole life. The room fell silent, the magnitude of the decision settling like dust after an explosion. Outside, the sun rose fully, flooding the suite with unforgiving light. There would be statements, backlash, threats, support, chaos. But for the first time since the note shattered, Jungkook's voice, strained, imperfect, undeniably human, had spoken not for a performance, not for a contract, but for himself. And in that fragile declaration, something far more powerful than a high note began to take shape. The press conference room smelled faintly of fresh paint and nervous sweat. Rows of cameras stood poised like silent witnesses, red recording lights blinking in anticipation. Journalists filled every seat, their murmurs weaving a low, restless hum that vibrated through the walls. Outside, fans pressed against barricades, their chants rising and falling like a living tide that refused to recede. Jungkook stood behind the curtain, fingers curled loosely at his sides. His throat still felt tender, a quiet reminder of the line he had crossed and the boundary he had finally chosen to honor. Beside him, Jimin adjusted the cuff of his sleeve for the third time in as many minutes, a nervous habit he had never quite outgrown. RM stood on Jungkook's other side, posture steady, presence grounding. You don't have to say everything, RM murmured, just say what's true. Jungkook nodded. The curtain parted. The noise hit like a wave, camera shutters, shouted questions, the electric tension of a world waiting to be told what this moment meant. He stepped to the podium. The microphones seemed closer than they should be, an array of metal eyes ready to capture every breath. He inhaled carefully. My voice broke, he began, his tone rough but unwavering, and for the first time, I didn't try to pretend it didn't. The room quieted, pens hovering midair. I grew up believing that being strong meant never faltering, he continued, that if I showed weakness, I would lose the love I worked so hard to earn. A murmur rippled through the audience. But when my voice failed on stage, he said, 70,000 people didn't turn away, they sang. In the back of the room, someone wiped their eyes. Jungkook's gaze flicked briefly to Jimin, who gave the smallest nod, his own eyes bright. I realized, Jungkook went on, that perfection was never what connected us, honesty was. A reporter raised her hand. Does this mean the tour is officially cancelled? Jungkook paused. The word cancelled felt heavy, final. He chose his own. The tour is paused, he said, because healing is not failure, rest is not defeat, and a voice that listens to its limits can sing longer than one that ignores them. Another reporter leaned forward. Are you concerned about sponsors withdrawing support? RM stepped to the microphone beside him. We are concerned with sustainability, of health, of artistry, of the people who make this work possible. Any partnership that cannot respect, that is not sustainable. The answer hung in the air, firm, measured, unmistakable. A third voice called out, sharper, there are rumors of a replacement vocalist. Can you confirm or deny? Jungkook's fingers tightened around the podium. He felt Jimin's presence beside him like a steady flame. There will be no replacement, he said. No one can replace a human being, not in music, not in life. The room fell into stunned silence before erupting into overlapping questions, flashes of light bursting like silent fireworks. Outside, the fans' chant shifted again, no longer pleading but proud, a rhythmic call of his name woven with words of rest, recovery, and love. Jungkook stepped back from the podium, the noise fading into a distant roar in his ears. His knees felt weak, but not from fear, this time from release. Backstage, the door closed behind them, muting the chaos. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then Jimin let out a breath that trembled at the edges. You just told the entire industry to slow down. Jungkook huffed a soft laugh. I told myself to. RM's lips curved into a rare, tired smile. That's where change starts. They stood there, three figures in a quiet corridor, the echoes of a storm still rumbling beyond the walls. The future remained uncertain, contracts would be renegotiated, headlines would spin, debates would rage. But something fundamental had shifted. Jungkook leaned his head briefly against the cool concrete wall, closing his eyes. In the darkness behind his lids, he heard it again, not the crack of the broken note, not the roar of controversy, but the sound that had carried him through the silence. Thousands of imperfect voices rising together. He opened his eyes and found Jimin watching him, expression soft, no words needed. RM checked his phone, already fielding the next wave with quiet resolve. The world would keep moving. It always did. Jungkook straightened, his throat still tender, his future unwritten, his voice no longer a weapon against himself, but a bridge he shared with others. He had feared that breaking would end the music. Instead, it had changed the song. And as the chants outside swelled once more, not demanding perfection, but offering patience, he understood that the most powerful harmony was not found in flawless notes, but in the courage to be heard exactly as you are, even when your voice trembles.